Hello, this is Jason Flowers, and this is part B of the video assignment Racialized Society. And in this part B, we've been tasked to look at a couple of videos and then answer questions. So the first question comes from the video Traces of Trade, and it asks, what role did racialization play in the creation and maintenance of industry and commerce in Bristol, Rhode Island? And before I get into that, I first want to say I didn't know that the little town of Bristol, Rhode Island was one of the largest trade cities in all of the world. It said that it was the largest the DeWolfs was the largest slave trader in American history. Didn't know that. So, as it pertains to the question and creation and maintenance of their industry and commerce, their industry was rum. And so that whole city, that whole town was really built on the backs of slaves because the slaves are the one who made this molasses and sugar that was needed to make this rum. And so what was amazing to me is that no one ever discussed how the DeWolfs became so rich, famous, popular. They just knew them for their rum and what they were doing in the city. They were politicians and rich and all of these things. But never, ever was it discussed that this whole industry, not only for them, but the entire city was on board with this, was built off the backs of slaves. So another question is, to what extent do you believe the advantages and disadvantages caused by racialization may still be in effect in Bristol, Rhode Island today? And, and it takes me back to the story that I read that was part of the discussion earlier this week on this little town where it was a town of a church, a small church group, and they didn't understand how come there weren't any blacks in their city. So it reminds me of that, to say that those folks in Bristol, how come people aren't there? How come blacks aren't there? How come blacks don't want to be a part of it? Because we now know what went on in Bristol. And in their minds, they're thinking that, hey, this is our town, this is our city, this is a great town, and I don't understand how come blacks don't want to live here. I don't understand how come, and if they come, they're welcome. Well, not really, because it has never been acknowledged. It has never been discussed. It has never been the air cleared on how the city ever became to be, the city of Bristol, in Rhode Island. So the advantages and disadvantages caused by racialization, it all boils down again to social economics. It all boils down again to money. And it all boils down again to, for me, looking at social justice and fairness. So then the other question that it asked is, in this video, what issues held significant meaning, raised questions, and stirred strong emotions within you? And the biggest thing that stirred emotions was inside of me, raised questions inside of me, is how could this go on for so long and no one ever wants to discuss it? One of the things that they came along that caused a problem for me is that, after a while, this is the North, and most folks think of slavery as being in the South. Well, this is the North, and the North was supposed to be for free, for where slaves, where black people went to be free. Well, no, not necessarily true, because the North had more slaves and built their industry around slavery more so than the South. And one guy called this big business vertical integration, meaning controlling all aspects of an industry. Man, in Bristol, they controlled everything. I mean, it was a monopoly to the fullest extent. And then not only to mention that, it was illegal for a great part of this time that the DeWolfs made their money. It was illegal, and they had political favor with President Jackson, by which their ships can come and go without any problems. So not only was this going on in Bristol, but the president of the United States was a part of this deal that allowed slavery to continue to happen. It was illegal. That's troubling to me, in that it was the North, and North was supposed to be for free, and the president of the United States was in on this. So that is part A. Part B looks at the video Difference Between Us, Race, the Power of Illusion. First question is, to what extent do you think belief in the illusion of race contributes to the creation or perpetration of perceptions that led to racialization? Well, this video was awakening for me because it says that race, the biological side of race, there is no difference between people. That's not true. That biology, meaning that our chromosomes, the things that we're made of, are different from one person to another. Our outer structure is different. Our skin color is different. Our nose may be different. Our eyes, the exterior may be different, but internally we're all the same. And it was amazing to me that scientific data showed that we're all the same. So, then it comes down to, what one gentleman called a paradigm shift. At one point in time, they believed the world was flat when the world was really round. And now, we have to get folks to understand that genetically, we're all the same. Exteriorly, we may be different, but genetically, we're all the same. So you talk about racialization, again, is segmented. People believe what they want to believe, and they can stereotype you however they want to. One, I still think it's because of fear. They don't want to unveil, in fear of, and I'll say, of losing money. Money is still the driving factor on this. If they have to agree that we're all the same, then they have to agree that we all should be, the same in terms of our power, money power, social economics, living conditions. Everything else would have to be the same. But because they don't want that to happen, meaning whites didn't want that to happen, so they had to remain this, keep up this difference between blacks and whites. So then the other question it asked is, in this video, what issue held significant meaning? Race questions or stirred strong emotions inside of you. And that would go back to, we're all products of our environment. And the one thing that really caused a problem for me is, they was looking at this thing called eugenetics, which talked about racial purification. They only wanted whites to mix with whites, blacks to be with blacks. And that was systematically designed so that, whites can, quote unquote, can remain the superior race while blacks were inferior. They even went to the extent of saying that blacks were going to be extinct. They were going to die off because of their genetics, which really found out to be true. There was a whole study done by a gentleman saying that whites are superior and blacks are going to die off. Well, really, at the very end of the day, it's really because blacks were decreasing in population because of the poverty, diseases, and lack of health availability to the medical benefits and things of that nature. And we had high infant mortality rates because we just didn't have access. Blacks didn't have access, because blacks didn't have money, blacks didn't have power, blacks didn't have a voice, blacks didn't have anything. So therefore, they were considered second-class citizens. They were considered lower than everyone else. So the thing that really caused the issue for me is that genetically, and it says in the Bible, we're all the same. We're not different. There's no one person different than the other genetically. We are products of our environment, which makes us different. And we are, our culture makes us different. How we were raised makes us different. Our experiences make us different. But at the very end of the day, just like it showed in this video, that we're more alike than we are different. There's more to us that are the same than we are different. So in conclusion, I really just want to say that in looking at this video, Difference Between Us, and also the video Traces of a Trade, that overall, we're all the same people genetically. We think Our brains operate the same. Our hearts beat the same. Our blood is red. We are genetically the same, and therefore we should all look at each other as brothers and sisters in Christ. We shouldn't look at each other any differently than brothers and sisters in Christ, knowing that we have different cultures, different perspectives, different ideas, different thoughts, again, products of our environments. And we have to recognize and acknowledge that. We have to recognize and acknowledge some of the wrongs that have been done in history. It's not so much today, although there is still racism today. There is still covert and overt racism today. There is still poverty. More blacks are in poverty than whites. I mean, some of those statistics remain the same. But again, one thing that holds true is that we're all are Christians. We all are sons and daughters of the high God, the high priest. And once we start looking at each other that way and treating each other that way, there's only one Bible, and the Bible is true. That we have to say no more differences, no more discrepancy, no more racism, and just because if you're all on God's team, we're all on the same team. There is no difference. If you are for God, if you are for Jesus, then we're all on the same team. So that's my summarization conclusion based off of the videos and even the readings that we had earlier this week. So thank you, and I look forward to your feedback. Have a most favorite day.